causing people to sin.
Oh, you're robbing them of blessings.
I don't want anybody here. I don't want to cause anybody here to sin. So today, and we can drop it in after the service if you guys want something, $1, a quarter, I don't care. It doesn't matter. But anyway, today we're going to talk about the faith of one. So I was praying and praying and praying for God to give me a message because like I was bone dry. I had nothing until I think I got home last night from work at 6 o'clock and I went upstairs and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. But on the way home from work, God was revealing things to me. So finally, I was getting scared. I told Melissa she might have to preach because I'm not going to preach a message to you that I just make up. I'm not going to do it. If God doesn't give it to me, I'm not going to give it to you. We'll sit here and we'll worship for an hour. We'll pray and we'll go home. So anyway, I just wrote on the top of this, the faith of one, because here's the thing, people think you can't make a difference by yourself, right? What can I do? You know, there's all of them people and then there's me, what can I do? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. You can do a lot because we're going to mention some people that did a lot, okay? So in Psalms 34:4, it says, in Psalms 34:4, David said, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. Okay, so David, I'm sure you've heard me speak about David because I talk about him all the time, but he was a man of faith. He prayed about everything and he believed in God, and he didn't believe there was anything that God couldn't do, David. Okay? And in verse 6 he says, this poor man cried and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. Alright, so this week we were talking about Jonathan. On Wednesday night we were talking about Jonathan, how it seemed really bleak and that they were getting ready to lose the war because people were running. It's kind of like, I watched a thing yesterday, a clip of Ukraine where people are just running into Poland and pouring into Poland and they're running. And then I saw our president, called the president over there and said, hey, we'll get you out of there. And he said, I'm not leaving, I'm staying there. I'm going to go out in the street and I'm going to fight with my people. You know, and so that's what one person can do, because I'm going to tell you, when the Ukrainians saw that and heard that their president's going to be out there fighting with the people, you think they're going to fight. They're going to quit running. They're thinking, that's my leader. If he's going to do it, I'm going to be there. Okay? And we talked about Jonathan, how he completely changed the course of that war. That people, the Israelites were running into the mountains and they were running into the hills and they were hiding. Right? And Jonathan said, I'm not going to stand here and die. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to fight. And he went by himself. Well, he brought his armor bearer because, you know, he was the king's son and God forbid he had to carry his own armor. But they went and they killed 22 people in a half an acre. And the Israelites seen what they did, just Jonathan, and they came out of the hills and they fought and they won that war. Okay? What's your half acre? Take it. Take the half acre. It's not, I'm telling you, you can do it, all right? And so when we were talking about Jonathan, today we're going to read in 1 Samuel, but we were talking about Jonathan, and now we're going to talk about David, and David and Jonathan became best friends. In fact, Jonathan saved David's life a couple times and said, hey, my dad's going to kill you. You better run. And he did. But anyway, we're going to start in 1 Samuel 17. Well, I don't feel like reading, but I'm going to. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 1, it says, now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Spocham, which belonged to Judah, and pitched between Shokak and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set battle in an array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley in between them. Okay, so the Philistines are on a mountain right here, because when I first read this, I was thinking, there's Israel are standing on one side of the mountain, those guys are standing on the other. Where they're going to go to the top and each fight each other? I mean, I think it's the top of a mountain. But what they're saying is there was a mountain here, and there was a mountain here, and there was a valley in between. So that's where they were going to fight, in that valley. All right? And give me 1 second. I have to take these hearing aids out because I keep getting reverb.
That was 1 Samuel 17?
Yes.
Yeah, 1 Samuel 17. That's kind of why I can't think here, because of the fact that I get reverb in those. I don't like to wear them here. So in verse 4, it says, can you hear me? No, I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
And there went out a champion of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. All right, so I didn't know what 6 cubits and a span was, okay? I had no idea, so I looked it up. I Googled it. 6 cubits in a span, which is 6.5 cubits, is 9 foot 9 inches. So this guy was 9 foot 9 inches, okay? I don't know how big David was. I like to imagine he was just this height right here, okay? That's what I imagine. He wasn't an old fat guy, I can tell you that. He was young. In fact, the king didn't even want him to fight because he thought he was too young to fight. And he sent him home, and he was taking care of the sheep. But anyway, and he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And one bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am I a Philistine, and you servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me, and he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then ye shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we fight together. So he's saying, you got this big old giant, right? And he comes down in the valley. And he says, we don't even have to have this war. Just send someone on down here to fight me. If you win, we'll serve you. You can take over our country. If I win, you serve us. So now you're slaves to us. Okay? So it says, now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. And he had 8 sons, and the man went among the men for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse and followed Saul to the battle. And the names of his 3 sons were his sons that went into battle were Eliab, the firstborn. Now, and this is how I know that David wasn't that tall, okay? Because earlier when Samuel went to Jesse's house to find out which son was going to end up being the king later on, Eliab had said he was tall and handsome, right? So that's how I know David wasn't that tall, because he was the run to the litter. He was the youngest. All right. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. So this giant is going out into this valley for 40 days saying the same thing. And Israel they're not sending anybody out there. And Jesse said unto David his son, take now for the brethren an ephah of parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp thy brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. So he's saying, take this food to the battle, find out how your brothers are doing. Pretty much Jesse wanted to make sure they were still alive, right? He wanted to make sure they didn't die in battle yet, and he gave some cheese to the captain of to their leader. Now Saul, it says, and now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench of the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion of the Philistine Goliath by the name, out of the armies of the Philistine, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. So he was talking to his brother, and all of a sudden the giant comes out, and he starts saying the same thing. Why won't you just send, why do we got to keep fighting this war? Just send somebody to beat me, or I'll beat somebody, and we could just end this war right now. Because he doesn't think he can be beat. I mean, think about it. Send one of us to fight a 9'9" guy, wearing all of that armor. He's got a sword that's as heavy as we are, that he's going to swing at us, right? I don't care if you have a sword in your hand, that guy's got a bigger sword because he can swing a heavier sword. All right? And David, and then it says, and the men of Israel said, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up, and it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and give him his daughter, and make his father's house free of Israel. Okay, so the guys are telling David, you know, whoever goes out and fights that giant, the king's going to give you his daughter to marry, and he's going to make you rich, and you won't never have to work again. I mean, it's a giant, but you know, I'm going to get rich. Anyway, it says, and David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? And now listen to this. This is what David says. For who is the uncircumcised Philistine that should defy the armies of the living God? So David doesn't understand why everybody's afraid. He's like, what did that king say he would give me? What you said the king would give me? If I kill that giant? And now he says, he's pretty much saying to the people, and people start getting angry with David now, because he's saying, this is an uncircumcised Philistine. I'm with the army of God, the one true living God. Why are you people afraid? Think about it. And the people answered him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, why comest thou down here? And with whom hast thou left the sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride. So his brother's angry. His brother's angry. You want to know why? Because he just went under conviction. Okay? You got his brother earlier in Samuel. It says that his brother is tall and handsome. And then you got little David. Okay? The youngest of 8 kids. So Eliab is the oldest of 8 kids, and David is the youngest, right? And David said, "What are you afraid of? We serve the one true living God." And now his brother's angry. His brother is mad because he's like, "So what are you saying? That you're better than us?" Right? And so David later on says, I'm not going to read it all up. I'm going to skip down to 35. But David pretty much says, "I'll go fight him." And everybody starts laughing, right? Hey, little David, you're going to go fight him. You're not even old enough. Then when we all came here to get picked to fight, Saul sent you home.
Yeah, you're the last one.
You know what I mean? Like, he didn't even think you were worthy to fight. But now you're going to go out there and you're going to fight that giant. And so I'm going to skip down to, I'll start 34. And David said unto Saul, thy servant, kept his father. Okay, so Saul, they sent him to Saul to talk to Saul. And Saul said, we're gonna have to go back up. And when the words were heard, which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul. And he sent for him. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with thy Philistines. So he's telling Saul the king, I'll go fight him. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. So he's saying, you're just a little kid. You can't go fight him. He's been fighting since he was a little kid, and he's a veteran warrior now. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. The servant slew both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing that he had defied the armies of the living God. So David's saying, you're calling me a little kid, but I was a shepherd. I was my dad's shepherd. I took care of the sheep. Okay? And a lion and a bear came to kill the sheep, and they took one of them. All right? Now, you got to understand something with David. I think they took them probably one after another, not at the same time. I don't think lions and bears get together. But anyway, you got to understand something about a shepherd. David didn't have a sword, right? He didn't have a gun to shoot the lion and the bear like we would do. He had a stick. That's what shepherds had. They had a stick. They had their staff, right? You all seen like the nativity set when Jesus was born, right? And the shepherds are there and they're holding a stick. That's what he had. That's what the shepherds had to fight off things that wanted to kill their sheep. Okay? So he's saying, look, I fought the lion and I fought the bear and I got my lamb back. All right? And I killed him. I grabbed him by his beard with my bare hands and I killed him. That's pretty tough. I don't think so I would run. But David, this is what I'm telling you, David had the faith, okay? And he keeps saying, who is this Philistine that wants to defy the armies of the living God? And that's all he keeps saying. He said it again there. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go and let the Lord be with thee. So he's like, you want to fight him? Go ahead, be my guest, fight him. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put on a helmet of brass upon his head, also armed him with the cost of mail. And David girded his sword upon his manner, and essayed to go, for he had not proved it. So King Saul says, okay, David, if you're going to go fight, at least let me give you my armor. So he puts his armor on him, right? And he puts this big helmet on him. And you got to understand the armor went on their legs. And then he gives him this big, heavy sword. And he's little, right? And Saul, I don't think, was a little guy. But he put his armor on him. And so here comes David walking out with the armor, right, to fight the giant. And he said to Saul, he said, listen, I didn't prove this. I didn't earn this armor. Just take it off. I'm going to go out there like I am. So I think back then he was probably like wearing, like, I don't know, a toga or something, who knows, right? And some sandals, all right? And that's how he was going to go fight this giant. I mean, picture it in your head. Now you got a little guy my size, not my size, he wasn't fat and old. He was a little skinny guy, okay? With this, like, who knows what he was wearing, but I mean, he didn't look like that giant, okay? And so he took the armor off. And it says, it's good, I'm telling you, it's going to get good here. And he took his staff in his hand, which was a stick, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistines. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David. And the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he was disdained, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. So he's telling David, he's like, he sees David coming, he starts laughing. He's like, are you kidding me? This is who they sent to fight me? And he's like, and he asked David, he said, am I a dog? Are you guys trying to, like, play a joke on me? Are you trying to just put me down to say that a little ruddy kid like you is going to beat me? And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and the beasts of the field. So he says, come on, if you want to fight, come on, I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to let the birds eat you. I'm going to leave you here for the vultures to get you. Then David, now think about this, okay? This next, what I'm going to read. You got this little skinny kid saying this to a 9'9" giant full of armor. Then David to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, God, the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied.
Yes.
This day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand, and I will smite thee and take thy head from thee. And I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistine this day unto the fowls of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all of the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all is assembled. So David, after the Philistine says to David, I'm going to kill you and I'm going to leave you out here for the vultures to get you. I'm not even going to bring your head to the king of Philistines, okay? I'm just going to leave you here because this is how easy this is going to be. And David says, I'm going to tell you what, giant, I serve the one true living God. You can't touch me. I'm going to kill you and I'm going to cut your head off with your own sword. And I'm going to put your head on the top of that sword, and I'm going to walk it into my King Saul. Wow. Think about it. And now this giant is looking at him like, are you kidding me? Right? But David he's speaking, he says he has the Lord. He isn't worried. Now you got to understand something. David, like we keep thinking about how we would feel, right? Facing this giant. David didn't know why the army was afraid in the first place. He didn't know why not one of them people in the army would go face that giant. He had no idea in his head, like he couldn't even conceive it. He had no fear of this giant. Okay, this little kid going out to fight this big giant, knowing that he was going to win. He didn't even have one inclination in his head that he might lose when he went out to fight the giant. That's how much faith David had. You want to know what happened? David, the giant, and David are standing out there. They took some steps back to get ready to fight. David took one of the rocks, one of the smooth rocks he picked up. I'm tired of reading. I'm just going to tell you what happened. He picked up one of the smooth rocks. He put it in his sling. He went like this, and he threw it at the giant and said it sunk into the giant's head and killed him, and the giant hit the ground. Okay? You know what David did then? He did exactly what he told him he was going to do. He took the sword out of the sheath. The giant was so unafraid, he didn't even take his sword out yet when David killed him. He took the sword out of the sheath of the giant and chopped his head off with his own sword, and put it on there and walked it into the camp and left the rest of his bodies for the vultures to eat. And you know what? This is what I'm trying to tell you. David had so much faith, there wasn't 1 ounce of fear in him. He just went out there. Now, you think that one person can't make a difference? If you have faith, you can't help somebody else to get faith? Listen to me. We talked about Jonathan on Wednesday. We're talking about David right now, okay? We talked about Joshua a couple weeks ago. Joshua had so much faith in God that he commanded the sun to stay out for 24 hours. And you know what happened? The sun stayed out for 24 hours. You think you have enough faith to do that? Just look at the sun and say, "Sun, I command you to stay out for 24 hours. And it just stays out. You should have that much faith. I'm going to tell you, you don't, but you should, because everybody shook their head no when I said, do you think you have enough faith to tell the sun to stay out? But you should, because you're no different than Joshua. You're no different than David. You were no different than Jonathan. You want to know something? I'm getting that kind of faith because I'm seeing it every single day of my life. God working and God working and God working and God working. And I'm realizing that I have to worry less, and I have to worry less, and I have to worry less, and I have to worry less. You know why I can worry less? You think that I could just put that stuff out of my mind? That I might lose my home, or I can't pay a car payment, or this? No, I am not putting it out of my mind. I know God will take care of it. I know I don't have to worry about it anymore. I know God will take care of it, and that's the faith. Yeah. You want to know something?
He is faithful.
What, me and Melissa, we have somebody suing the company, right, because of some roof thing, and we're not even, I don't even think about it. Now I'm going to tell you, 20 years ago, I would have been worried so sick I wouldn't have slept. I would have had an ulcer. I would be, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? They're going to take I would be telling Melissa, shut it down, just shut down the business. I'm running. Okay, but that's not today. I'm not running. I'm facing the giant because I have that much faith today. Okay, I'm not worried about it. So I have a little bit more. That ain't it. Just because I got excited, I'm sorry. But I also want to go. I want to go to Matthew 17. You know, God would give me this message to read all of this on a day that, my eyes aren't working very well. I woke up sweating this morning, and I can't barely read. But this is what he gave me, and this is what I'm going to give you. All right, so I'm just trying to find the verses that I'm looking for here.
Is it Matthew 7?
But I guess I lost it. Anyway, we're gonna go to Matthew 17, and we're gonna start in verse 14. I think I was gonna start later, but I can't find it, so this is where we're gonna go. And this is what I was saying. You can either have faith, like David and all the guys we just talked about, or you can have this. Okay? And this was the disciples following Jesus. They've already been following Jesus for a long time, okay? And it says up top, a demonic boy healed. And when they were come to the multitude, there came him a certain man, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is a lunatic and of sore vexed, and sore vexed. For oft times he falleth into the fire and oft into the water. And I brought him to the disciples, and they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him. And the child was cured from that very hour. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, why couldn't we cast him out? So this guy, he saw the disciples. He knew they were with Jesus, right? And he ran up to him and he said, can you please help my son? He acts like a lunatic. He had a mental problem, okay? And back then, I don't think it was against any rules to call somebody with a mental problem a lunatic. Nowadays, if you said, my son's a lunatic, people would say, you shouldn't say that. But anyway, what a lunatic meant was he wasn't right in the head, okay? And he said, he's thrown himself in the fire, and sometimes he tries to drown himself in the water, and we have to save him and pull him out. He said, he asked the disciples prayed on him, nothing, didn't heal him. And so that's what they're telling Jesus. He's saying, these are the disciples that follow you, and they couldn't heal him. Could you heal him? So Jesus did. And then the disciples came to him afterwards and said, how is it, we've been following you, how is it that you can heal him, but we can't heal him? And this is what Jesus had to say to him, okay, because they could have healed him. And Jesus said unto them, because of your unbelief, for verily I say unto you, if ye have faith of a grain of a mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place. Talks kind of like me. And it shall be removed, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. Howbeit, this kind goeth not, but by prayer and fasting. Okay, so they asked Jesus, they said, Jesus, why couldn't we heal him? And Jesus said, because you don't have any belief. Think about it. These are the disciples that you hear about all through the New Testament, right? That from day one that Jesus started his ministry, they followed him. And they don't have enough belief in God to create a miracle. And so that's what they asked Jesus. They said, Jesus, why couldn't we cure him? I mean, we pray with you. We do everything you tell us to do, and we couldn't cure him. And he said, because you don't have any belief. If you have the faith of a grain of a mustard seed. I read about a mustard seed, okay? I read about it in the Bible, and I don't know if it's in this chapter. I'm just going to tell you. The grain of a mustard seed is the smallest seed out of any seed you ever seen. All right, so you've probably seen some pretty small seeds. I don't know if you remember, when I was a kid, we used to get some packets of seeds of flowers. They would give us once a year at school, and we would try to go home, and we were going to plant them, and it was going to make our mothers real happy. But you would rip it open, and I mean, them seeds were tiny, right? So I would just pour them in one spot by the front porch and say, well, hopefully they grow. But that was me, all right? But that seed that you see for that flower, the grain of a mustard seed is half that size. All right? And this is what Jesus is saying. If you have the faith of the grain of a mustard seed, you can do this and much more. All you have to do is pray and believe in God, and it'll happen. Okay? So if you're praying about something and it ain't happening, for one, is it in God's will? All right? Because if you're praying, and I know my wife prays about going on vacation all the time, probably not drinking a margarita, but if you're praying to go to Mexico and drink margaritas on the beach, probably not in God's will. Okay, if you pray that God will send you over to Mexico to like witness to people and be a missionary, you're probably going to go and say, God, why did you bring me here? But anyway, all right, the thing is, are you praying in God's will? Is this something that you know God would want for you? Okay, that's God's will. All right, and the other thing is, if you're not getting it, fast. Okay, people say, okay, think that fasting just is sacrificing something. All right, don't eat for a day and pray that whole entire day. Or you know what? Don't watch TV for a week. Say, God, I'm going to give up TV, and instead of watching TV for that hour a night, I'm going to pray to you for that hour of the night. And you want to know something? You're going to start hearing from God if you do that. It says it right here. Jesus said it. You can't create this stuff only by fasting and praying. And it doesn't have to be something big. Sometimes I'll fast breakfast. Everybody knows breakfast is important to me. I go to the gym at 5:30 in the morning, so I pretty much have to eat breakfast or I'm not going to do much at the gym. But because that is important to me, it's more important than lunch and it's more important than dinner, I'll fast breakfast because that's the most important meal of the day to me. Okay? And then instead of going to the gym that day, I pray. I stay home, I fast, and I pray. And I'll pray about something, and every single time, I think I've gotten a breakthrough. I'm not going to tell you that every single time I did because I'm not exactly sure, but when I fast and I pray, I usually get a breakthrough, and God will tell me how to do it. Okay? He might not always do it for me, but He will show me the way. All right? And so, this is what I'm trying to say. You have to have faith. Even if you ask somebody, I see it all the time on Facebook and on this and on that, and I hear it from people because they know that I'm a Christian. Oh, will you pray for me? Oh, will you, I see it on Facebook. I got to get chemo. Will you pray for me? I'll pray for you, but are you going to believe it's going to happen? You know what I mean? God will let it happen. Because if I pray and I believe, God will let it happen, but He's going to take a little longer because He wants you to know that God did it. All right? God will do things. He will do crazy things that you couldn't imagine because it says in this Bible, God can do all things. And through God, you can do all things.
Amen.
That's right.
It doesn't say maybe, but it has a stipulation here. If you're not getting your breakthrough, fast and pray. Pray about it. And so, I'm just trying to tell you that, like, you have to have faith because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now with this war. Okay? This war is crazy. Everybody's worried. Oh, is the economy, is it gonna bust the economy? This, that. We already know Russia don't like us, right? I mean, and so, I'm not worried about Ukraine. Ukraine can pretty much stand by themselves. They're the largest country in Europe. Okay, they might not have the weapons, but we're giving them the weapons, and NATO's giving them weapons. And I just read Elon Musk, their biggest fear was being shut off from the world because they took out the towers for their internet, and Elon Musk just started the SpaceX thing up there and gave them all internet. So, I mean, I'm not too crazy worried about Ukraine. I'm more worried about Israel because right now you have Russia, Syria, and China surrounding Israel. And I think China might have left because China's already saying, you know what, Putin, here, look at, I'm not backing you up. You're going a little far here.
Yes.
But I'm more concerned with them, and I've been praying for them every day, and I have the faith. And here's the thing, you know, everybody says, oh, it's the end of the world, it's the end of the world, it's the end of the world. You know what? You read Jonah. Okay, because God was going to destroy that city. And the fish spit Jonah out when he wouldn't go tell the king to repent. And he told the king of Nineveh to repent. And they were all spared. Because the king said, okay, let's do it. So, you know what? Just because all this stuff is happening doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Now, if you read Revelations, we're getting close. Because it just keeps happening, and it keeps happening, and it keeps happening. And the thing about Russia being surrounding Israel is, I mean, I believe that's in Ezekiel in the Bible where Gog takes Magog. And I think that's Russia taking Israel, I think, but that's me, okay? I read it this morning or yesterday morning, and that's where I got out of it. But anyway, I'm saying that there is nothing God can't do, you just have to have the faith. And I know every single person standing in here today has something they need. And me and Melissa is going to pray for each and every one of you today. I'm not going to say if you got a need, come on up here because you're all going to sit right there. I'm saying me and Melissa, if you can sit in that chair, we'll walk to you. But we're going to pray for every single one of you here today because every single one of you have a need. I know personally that every single one of you have a need. Except maybe, G, because he's got the life, but he has needs. I'm joking, G. I'm joking with you. But the thing is, I have faith today that whatever your need is can be solved. All I need somebody to do is agree with me. And I'll tell you this, I'm a prayer warrior. But when me and Melissa get together, we're a prayer army. Okay?
Right.
And I need somebody to agree with me because it says that 2 or more.
Agree.
That's it. All right, so we're going to stop the live feed. I'm sorry, you guys should have came today because there's going to be healing in this building, and we're not even going to let you see it. So be jealous.